couple of things before I start. First off, I've got lots of notes, so we're all going to have to enjoy that awkward moment where I shuffle paper together. Second is that there is a brief reference to Gene Wilder in this talk, and obviously he did pass away yesterday. So I just want to make that known to everyone because it makes me sad and I'm going to be looking at it. So, hello everyone, and welcome to my talk. It is on... Does this work? What's going on? There you go, that one. Yeah! Collaborative comedy in video games, or how I learned to stop worrying and love getting crushed by objects shot from space. That will become relevant later on. Now, just a quick bit of background about me. I was doing a PhD in Cardiff. I had a mid-20s crisis, so I'm now going to be opening a bookshop. And feel free to follow me on Twitter at Gareth Monk. There's lots of tweets about Deep Space Nine and also retweets of Simpsons GIFs. There's pretty much the two things I do. So if you're interested in that, go ahead. Anyway, on to comedy. Now, in my mind, Mel Brooks is one of the great sort of comic creators, and he said that tragedy is when I cut my finger, comedy is when you fall into an open sewer and die. Now, it's a brilliant quote, and I also feel that it makes shows the importance of context in comedy. So an example here, this is a picture of me looking at something, but we don't know what the context is. And it's me looking at a waterfall, but you're wrong, I'm actually looking at a cat. So that shows you how important context is in video games, because you know I was looking at the cat until I showed you the cat. It's a bit of a weird example, but we'll go with it. Anyway, in video games, I feel, and in comedy in general, there are two main forms: active and passive comedy in video games. Now, what I've done to demonstrate this is use pictures of my dog, because everyone likes dogs. So that's a picture of my dog looking passive, and that's a picture of my dog looking active. So there you go, those are the two demonstrations. I will be going into these in more detail. I won't just be explaining these with dog pictures, although some of you may want me to do that, I don't know. Anyway, passive comedy is generally comedy that is enjoyed passively. You don't actively participate in the comedy when you're consuming it. Now this can be TV shows like Garth Brooks' Dark Place, films like Blazing Saddles, or podcasts like Regular Features. Now as I said, you're making no direct contribution to the comedy consumed. You're merely just engaging in it by watching it or listening to it, but you're not actually creating what's there. Now, the act of enjoying and consuming media is not inherently funny. So yes, you may find a television show amusing, but you sitting there and watching it isn't an inherently funny act, unless you're this guy who loves sitting down. Look at him, he's having a great time. Now, passive comedy in video games generally is, I would say historically speaking, where the majority of video game comedy comes from. An early example I like to use, which is actually comes out before I was born, which may depress some of you in the room, is The Secret of Monkey Island. Now, yeah, there we go. It's a 1990s point-and-click game developed by LucasArts, in which your character, Guybrush Threepwood, wants to become a pirate. Now, the humour in this game comes from the script, it comes from the world, it comes from the objects you pick up, and it comes from generally the way that the designers built this world around you. Oops, sorry, I went too far. I'll go back. Okay, we'll just go with it. No, okay. It's going well. Okay, so anyway, however, you can easily remove the method of interaction that you have with the game. You could change it from a point-and-click adventure to a third-person action adventure, and it would still be just as funny, because pointing and clicking on things isn't an inherently funny act, unless you're this guy who's just clearly loving it and loving his Excel spreadsheets. Now, Brutal Legend is another good example, more recent example, more interesting example, I would argue, of passive comedy in video games. Now, Brutal Legend is ostensibly just another Jack Black film. He features in it, he voice acts in it, the script and the pacing, particularly the cutscenes, is very similar to a Jack Black film. It features a pastiche of metal iconography and particular popular characters, such as Ozzy Osbourne we have here, from that world. Now, Brutal Legend starts off, for those of you who haven't played it, as a kind of light hack and slash game, but around sort of, I think it's about third or midpoint, it does turn into a real-time strategy game. Now, when this came out, it was criticised on its release for this move. Many people thought the real-time strategy aspect of it was kind of half-baked, that it wasn't as good as some of the other elements of it. However, if you play the game, it doesn't detract from the humour, because the humour in the game isn't intrinsically linked to the actual gameplay mechanics. Now, to me, this demonstrates that passive comedy in video games it's merely set dressing. It's a hack and slash that is a comedy, rather than a comedy that is a hack and slash. You know, you have a gameplay mechanic you've got defined before you start making the game, but then you decide you want to make it a comedy game, like in Brutal Legend's case. It's also interesting to note that games are one of the few comedic mediums where the actual method in which they're delivered is criticised. You don't have someone who goes to see a comedy film criticising the fact that they had to sit down and watch it on a screen. You don't have someone who watches an episode of a comedic TV program, the fact they had to sit down to the television and watch it. People criticise comedy video games for their mechanics because they are not as good as their artistic output. Now this brings us on to active comedy. Now, a quick fact about myself, I actually did improv comedy for 5 years at university. There's a picture of us jumping around, having a good time. Yes, all the annoying stereotypes of improv comedians are true. We're all annoying and bubbly and in your face, as you can probably tell from the way I'm presenting this talk. So, the beauty of active comedy is that you're actively contributing to the comedy you make. Whose Line Is It Anyway is the most famous example. Excuse me. And in Whose Line Is It Anyway, there are a number of games. For those of you who haven't watched it, go watch it. It's really, really good. Now, it's not only that the performers are collaborating to create this comedy, it's that you as an audience member are collaborating to create this. Now, just a really super quick crash course on improv comedy. Each game is a set framework or rules for the performers, and the context for these games comes from suggestions taken from the audience. And these can be a location, a relationship, a particular quirk for a performer. An example of this game, a particular game, is party quirks. Now, party quirks, yes, there are 4 performers, and 1 performer is the host of a party. The other 3 performers are his guests, and the host performer has to leave the room, and 3 other performers are assigned quirks by the audience that the host must guess. He obviously hasn't heard these, he has to come back in, host the party, and guess those assigned quirks. Now, the beauty of that is that as an audience member, you're actively contributing to the comedy on stage. You can give a suggestion that can create the biggest laughter in the room the whole night, and you'll know that it was you, yes, you, that gave that suggestion, and you're the one who created that massive laugh, and that's an amazing feeling, because you're not necessarily a performer, but you are contributing to the comedy. Oh, yeah, okay, cool, sorry. Now, identity and in-group identity in comedy is extremely important. We form social groups a lot based on humour, and in person that's very easy, but when you have large geographical gaps between you, it can become quite difficult. Now, the rise of multiplayer gaming has led to a lot of people being interacted where they normally wouldn't. Friends who you live countries apart from, people who you don't necessarily share a location with, but you share interest with, you can interact with them much more easily than you used to be able to. So that facilitates in-group membership. Another thing to note is the rise in independent game development. The rise in independent game development means that new ideas and new ways of delivering content and humour are facilitated through, the lack of physical distribution, and you've got new, brilliant digital distribution now. Now, active comedy in video games, I'm going to be talking about one particular game, an example, and that game is Helldivers. Now, for those of you who haven't played Helldivers, it's a top-down twin-stick shooter developed by Arrowhead Games, the same people doing Magicka and Magicka 2. Now, Helldivers, in terms of its setting and in terms of its tone, is very similar to the film Starship Troopers. The actual comedy that's delivered in the game through the dialogue, the world building, the script, and the voice acting is fairly minimal. There's very little of this actually in the game, and more often than not, you will actually encounter the same looped lines repeatedly. Now, where the comedy in this game comes from is the mechanics that Arrowhead have put into the game. Now, in the game, the mechanics that Arrowhead have constructed allow players to collaboratively construct the context, the setup, and the punchline for jokes all within the game. Now, to do this, Arrowhead use, and if you allow me to be super pretentious for a second, something I like to call, it is something that's well established, relief theory. You see a quote here, that laughter is a homeostatic mechanism by which psychological tension is reduced. Humour may thus, for example, serve to facilitate relief of tension caused by one's fears. Now, this relief theory is a fantastic thing to use in video games because you're not actually under any actual physical threat. In real life, you may laugh at nearly being hit by a bus, but the fact is you were nearly hit by a bus. In video games, you could be nearly hit by a bus, but just your character in a video game is nearly hit by a bus. So, it's absolutely fine because you're under no fear at all. Now, Helldivers utilises relief theory in fantastic ways. Now, Helldivers is a very intense game. More often than not, you are surrounded on all sides, and you need to call in a power-up to help defend your team. Now, these power-ups are called stratagems, and in order to activate them, they're very similar to a Dance Dance Revolution combo. You have to hold down one button whilst inputting sometimes fairly lengthy string of directional inputs, all whilst being shot at. There are some enemies that can cause this to reverse, so all the inputs are backwards. But once you get this stratagem, if you want to call in an airstrike, for example, you then have an orb to throw. Now, this orb is fantastically unreliable. It bounces off everything. If you get shot while you're holding it, you drop it where you fall, which can be in the middle of all your friends, and it just generally doesn't always go where you want it to. Now, but you think that's fine. I've got the orb, I've thrown it where I want, and I've called down the airstrike. All me and my friends are going to be safe. However, what you forget to realize is that in Helldivers, airstrikes are called down perpendicular to your position. So you're fine, but you managed to wipe out all 3 of your teammates. And this is fantastic because you've created there an anecdote, a humorous situation that you and your friends can talk about later on, and that you've created that entire joke just through playing a game. But obviously you'll still want to continue the mission, so you need to bring your friends back. You want them back, you need them back. And that is another dog picture. I said there wouldn't be any more, but I forgot about that. You need to bring them back. Now, the respawn mechanic in Helldivers is another really great use of relief theory. It's another strategy you have to put in, so another one of those Dance Dance Revolution combos. It's another fantastically unreliable orb that you have to throw. But once you throw it, you've got 5 seconds there. You have to hold out until your teammates can come back, and it will drop in straight from the sky. But the problem is you're so focused on killing that one alien, that one bug that's trying to get you, that you completely lose focus on the small shadow pinprick that's descending from the sky. And before you can even say what a fantastic use of relief theory this is, you are completely squashed by the drop pod. All your friends come back, but you're dead, killed by the respawn mechanic. And it's just a fantastic, again, use of relief theory and irony, and it's a wonderful use of humor. Now, there are many other great games that utilize the mechanics coming out. Overcooked is a recent example. We've also got Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time, and Gang Beasts. Gang Beasts is a particular favorite of mine because that is so wonderfully indicative of how active humor could be used, because there is zero context in that game. You are crazy colored clay people flailing around in these kind of weird, nondescript environments like that furnace there. There's no context giving your actions, but the way the gameplay mechanics limit you and your movement mean that these amazing anecdotes are created. And now I think that it's really important that games continue to do this, because as the distance between human beings in terms of the way we interact greatens, the way we can kind of talk with each other also changes. Now, you know, you and I, or if you have a kind of social group you meet up with regularly in person, you might be able to go to a pub, for example, like here, or another social context in which you can tell a funny story and you can tell some of your other friends how 2 of you did this incredibly amazing thing. But if you don't get to talk to your friends in person that much, and you don't get to experience these sort of shared nights out or events you go to, you're not going to get to do that. And I think these new collaborative humor games are a really amazing way of getting people to share that. Also something like improv comedy. Not everyone wants to do improv comedy. I'm a bit of an egotist, so I love it. But like, not everyone wants to do that. Not everyone likes being on stage, and not everyone is comfortable with that. That's perfectly fine, but you can get that same feeling and that same sense of achievement from these active humor games. Now I'm just going to leave you with this gif of lots of people dying in Helldivers. And that's pretty indicative of the game. It's a wonderful experience. And I think that if games like this continue, and we can help people find laughter and share laughter with people, which is a beautiful thing, I think it's something we should achieve. And I used that one cheesy effect on the last one because I was waiting for it. And thanks very much for listening, everyone.